Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The alarm hit at the same moment the base lights went red. Gray was already moving. Rifle up. Scotty 2 steps behind him, breathing hard, cursing the way he always cursed when things went bad. "Perimeter's gone," Scotty said. "East wall. They're inside." "How many?" "Enough." They came around the mess hall and the night lit up, muzzle flash, screaming. A trooper Gray had eaten breakfast with hung half out of a doorway, not moving. The smell hit next. Cooked meat and ozone. The aliens moved wrong. Too smooth. Too fast for their size. Tall things, hunched, and where a face should be, there were 4 eyes set wide across the skull, catching the red light and throwing it back like wet glass. They saw everything. You could not flank them. Gray learned that in the first 30 seconds, when a man broke left and got opened from shoulder to hip by a thing that never turned its head. "Cover!" Gray shouted. They took a supply trench. Scotty went down beside him, came up firing. The alien staggered, did not fall. Gray put 3 more into it, and it finally folded, all 4 eyes going dark at once. "They don't stop," Scotty said. His voice was flat. That was worse than panic. "You hit them and they don't stop. Then we hit them more." It went on like that. Room by room, trench by trench. Humans died in 1s and 2s, and the 4-eyed things died in 1s and 2s. And nobody was winning. They were just spending each other. Gray lost track of the base layout, lost track of who was still alive on the net. He heard command go silent mid-sentence and did not let himself think about it. They pushed toward the motor pool because that was where the fighting was thickest, and that was where the line had to hold. Scotty was still with him, reloading on the move, talking, because Scotty always talked. "When this is over," Scotty said, "I'm putting in for a transfer somewhere with a beach." "You hate the beach." "I hate this more." An alien came over the vehicle barricade, fast. Scotty turned into it and fired, and it took the rounds and kept coming, and its arm came down, and Scotty was on the ground, and the thing was on top of him. Gray emptied his rifle into its skull at contact range. It died. So did Scotty. It happened in the space of 1 breath. Gray did not get to say anything. There was no time, and there was no one to say it to. He knelt there a second, just 1. Then he got up, because the line still had to hold, and grief was a thing you did later, if there was a later. That was when he remembered the kitchen. The cooks, the non-combatants. They'd been herded to the kitchen block when the alarm went, because it was interior, because it was supposed to be safe, and the perimeter was supposed to hold, and the perimeter had not held. Gray ran. The east corridor was a slaughterhouse. He stepped over people he knew. The kitchen doors were ahead, hanging open, dark, and he already knew what he was going to find. He had seen it a dozen times tonight, in a dozen other rooms. The aliens got into a soft place, and they emptied it. He went through the doors ready for the worst thing he had ever seen. He stopped. The kitchen was destroyed. Steel tables overturned. Pots across the floor. Blood up the walls. Black in the emergency light, and bodies. The cooks were dead, all of them but 1. They had not gone quietly. Gray could read that much in the wreckage, in the knives on the floor, in the way they'd fallen. Untrained people who had picked up whatever was in reach, and fought, and lost, and taken 2 of the 4-eyed things down into the dark with them before they went. 2 alien bodies lay among the human ones. And a 3rd alien lay across a prep counter, and standing over it, swaying, 1 arm hanging wrong and slick to the elbow, was the last cook. The heavy one. Tavares. 40 years old, and built like a fire plug. Gray coming into her hair, an apron soaked through dark. She had a meat cleaver in her good hand. She was breathing like a bellows and staring at the dead thing on the counter, and she did not seem to know Gray was there. The alien on the counter had a wooden cooking spoon buried in one of its 4 eyes, driven into the handle. Gray looked at it for a moment. He had spent the whole night watching trained men die. He had watched Scotty die, and Scotty was the best of them, trained, armed. And this woman, who had never held a weapon in her life, who had a spoon and a cleaver and a bad arm, was standing in a room full of dead enemies. Luck. Some of it was luck. Gray knew that. You did not survive one of those things without the universe deciding to let you. But luck did not put the spoon in the eye. Luck did not explain why. Cornered with nothing, she had picked up a spoon and gone at them instead of curling into a corner to die. Every instinct in a body said, freeze. Hers had said the other thing. That was what he remembered, not the spoon, the choosing. "Ma'am," he said, "it's over. They're down." Tavares looked up at him. Her eyes were wild and furious and wet, and her voice, when it came, was a rasp. "They came into my kitchen," she said. Like it was the worst thing anyone had ever done. Like the war itself was rude. Gray almost laughed. He didn't. He crossed the room and took the cleaver gently out of her hand and got a shoulder under her good arm, and he walked her out through the doors, past the men he knew, into a morning that was starting to gray the sky. He did not know her name yet. Not really. He would learn it. Everyone would. Years later. The docking gantry of the Ashwall concourse smelled like a dozen species idea of clean, which was to say it smelled like nothing, filtered and cold and perfect. It was the largest neutral station in council space, and once a cycle, it hosted the Galactic Technology Fair, and every civilization that mattered came to show the others what it had built. Then the humans docked. The ships came in ugly. There was no other word and no kinder one. Where the Salitha cruisers were long and pale and seemed to glide without moving, and the other delegations' vessels gleamed like jewelry, the human ships looked like something welded together in anger, slab-sided, blunt, scorched, plating that did not match, guns that were too big for the hulls and made no attempt to hide it. They came into the pristine berths, looking completely out of place. On the observation concourse, a Salitha attaché tilted its long, fine head and said something soft and melodic to its companion, and the companion made the rippling gesture that passed for laughter among their kind. Down the rail, a cluster of delegates from 3 species watched the human ship settle into dock and did not bother to lower their voices because they didn't think it mattered. They were still watching, still amused, when the sound came up from the cargo bay. "Who the hell put that crate on top of my baby?" It carried across the whole concourse, flat and furious and entirely human, and every elegant head turned. A woman came up the cargo ramp, short, heavy, older now, gray gone to iron, an unlit cigarette clamped in the corner of her mouth, and a datapad in one fist. She wore a stained coverall with the sleeves shoved up thick forearms, and she was pointing the datapad at a loading crew like a weapon. "That's a precision housing," she snapped. "You stack a ton of freight on a precision housing, you know what you get. You get a very expensive paperweight. Off. Off." The loaders scrambled. She watched them with the flat contempt of a woman who had seen every kind of stupid there was. On the observation rail, the Salith attaché made a quiet remark. Something about the state of a species that sent that to a technology fair. More rippling laughter. Captain Thomas Gray came down the ramp behind her, and if he heard the laughter, he gave no sign. He had Gray of his own now, cropped close, and he moved through the perfect corridor like a man who had long ago stopped caring what rooms thought of him. "Juanita," he said, "leave the loaders alive. We need them." They put a crate on Sweet Pea. I know, a crate. On Sweet Pea. I know. Gray almost smiled. Are we going to have a problem at customs? We're going to have a problem if anybody else touches my babies. She jammed the cigarette tighter into her mouth. She never lit them. Everyone assumed she'd quit. No one asked. "Where's Teo? I need him on the port battery before some genius here decides to inspect it." Falatau's got him. Down the ramp came the rest of them. Falatau first, because Falatau went first through everything. A wall of a man, Master Sergeant, quiet as a closed door, carrying a case that he set down with more care than the ships had been built with. Behind him, Volmer, who everyone called Rook, lean and unbothered, chewing something, looking at the gleaming station like it personally bored him. And last, young Vask, Teo, eyes going everywhere at once, talking already, a fast, nervous stream that Juanita cut off without looking. "Teo, port battery, now. And eat something. You look like a corpse." I ate. You didn't eat. I had. You didn't eat. Falatau. Did he eat? No, Falatau said. "There. Go." Teo went. Gray watched the loaders back away from the human ships, like they'd been caught doing something obscene, and he watched the elegant species on the rail watch his people, and he let them. Let them look. Let them laugh. It cost nothing, but it could cost them later. And Gray had learned a long time ago in a ruined kitchen that the things people underestimate are the things that kill them. The fair floor was a cathedral of everyone else's genius. The Salitha had a whole gallery to themselves, a suspended lattice of light and quiet machines that did things no one fully explained, tended by tall, pale figures who moved like the concept of hurry had never reached them. Other delegations filled the tiers below, weapon systems that hovered, drives that folded space in a jar, shields you could set your hand against. It was beautiful. All of it. It hummed with the confidence of a galaxy that had been civilized a very long time. The humans had a corner near the freight doors. Their display was 3 of the ugly guns on a rack and a lot of empty space because they had not brought much and had not dressed up what they brought. Delegates drifted past it, slowed, looked, and moved on with the small, polite dismissal of people leaving a poor stall at a market. Gray stood by the rack and said nothing, and watched the room. At the center of it, on the raised council floor, was the reason the fair mattered at all this cycle. High Counselor Eleni had come in person, a Salith of great age and greater standing, taller even than the others of his kind, robed in something that moved like water. He presided over the floor with a stillness that made the whole vast room orient toward him without being told to. When he spoke, rarely, softly, species leaned in to catch it. He was calm, made flesh. He was everything the galaxy told itself it was. And near the council floor, granted the space a respected delegation is granted, stood the Kestal. Gray clocked them the moment he walked in. They were reptilian, heavy through the shoulders, scaled in dull, overlapping plates the color of old iron. They didn't gleam, and they didn't glide. They held still, a deep, patient, coiled stillness, the stillness of something in tall grass. And their delegation was received with the wary courtesy the galaxy extends to a power it doesn't like and cannot ignore. Council and Kestal had a history. Everyone knew it. The polite word for it was tension. The honest word was war that hadn't started yet. Their leader wore a harness of rank and no expression a human could read. When Eleni spoke, The Kestal watched him with all the warmth of a thing watching a smaller thing eat. Gray did not know the reptile's name yet. Zari was his name. He would learn that later. Falatau came to stand beside him, quiet, following his eyes. "You see it," Falatau said. "Not a question." "I see it." "Room's happy. Room thinks it's a party." "Room's wrong," Gray said. Behind them, at the human corner, Juanita was explaining to a curious Salitha technician in the loud, slow voice people use on the very young or the very foreign, that no, it wasn't a mining tool. And yes, she had built it. And no, he could not touch it. Rook had his boots up on a crate, asleep or pretending. Teo hovered over the port battery like a mother over a crib. It looked like nothing. 5 humans and some ugly machines in a corner by the freight doors. Gray kept his eyes on the Kestal, and the Kestal kept their eyes on the counselor, and the beautiful room hummed along, sure of itself, sure of everything. It happened between one soft Salith sentence and the next. Later, no one could agree on what came first, the lights, or the sound, or the way the Kestal delegation simply stopped being still. Gray saw it start because he was already looking. The coiled stillness broke all at once into motion, fast, appalling, the tall grass thing finally moving, and the fair zone systems died in the same instant. The lattice of Salith light stuttered. Doors that should have sealed hung open. Whatever the Kestal had done to the station, they had done it patiently, over a cycle of smiling delegation, and now they spent it all at once. The council floor came apart in screaming. Gray was moving before he'd decided to. "Falatau, on you!" Kestal poured across the council floor, and the galaxy's finest security met them and folded, because the galaxy's finest security had never in living memory had to do this. Elegant species scattered. The Salith did the worst possible thing, which was nothing. They froze, beautiful and still and useless, as the reptiles carved a lane straight to the raised floor. To Counselor Eleni, the old counselor did not run. Perhaps he could not. He stood in his watercolored robe as the Kestal closed on him, and their leader, the one in the harness of rank, took him by the throat with one scaled hand and lifted him like he weighed nothing at all. The room shrieked and did nothing. 1,000 delegates from 100 worlds, and the shape of the whole galaxy in that room, and every one of them stood, or ran, or wailed, and not one of them moved toward the counselor. Gray had his sidearm up and there was no shot. Too many bodies. Too far. The Kestal fell back the way they'd come, fast and coordinated, Eleni limp in their grip, and they were through the dead doors and gone into the guts of the station before council security had finished forming a line to defend a counselor who was no longer there. Then it was over, and the beautiful room was full of noise and no action, delegates clutching delegates, a Seleth voice somewhere rising in a long, melodic keen, and everywhere the same paralysis. The shock of civilized things that had forgotten a thing like this was even possible, tangled already in who had authority and who would convene and what the protocol was. Gray lowered his weapon. He looked at the dead doors. He looked at his people. They were already looking back at him. Falatau, still. Rook, awake now, boots on the floor. Teo, pale. And Juanita, cigarette gone from her mouth to her fist, watching Gray with an expression that had nothing soft in it, at all. Nobody in the whole galaxy was going to go after that counselor. Gray put his sidearm away. "Get to the ships," he said. The galaxy's response to a kidnapping was to hold a meeting. By the time Gray reached the concourse, the Ashwal's great hall had become a wall of noise and no motion. Council security had formed lines. Around the empty council floor, around the delegates, around each other. Nobody advanced toward the dead doors the Kestal had gone through. A cluster of officials had already assembled near the transit hub, robed and gleaming, and they were doing the thing the galaxy did best. They were deliberating. Cannot act without a convened quorum. Jurisdiction over station security falls to the host authority, not to. The Dominion will deny all involvement. We must be certain before we accuse. Certain. Gray heard that word, and something in him went cold and level. There had been 100 of the four-eyed things pouring across a base once, and men had died, while other men waited to be certain. He had learned the price of certain a long time ago. In a war these people had never had to fight. He walked through them. He moved through the knot of officials the way water moves through a fence, and his people moved with him. Falatau a wall on his left, Rook loose and easy on his right, Teo close behind, Juanita last with her datapad still in her fist. The official's words broke against Gray's back and did not stop him. One of them peeled off to follow. A tall council functionary, some species Gray didn't have time to name, keeping pace on long, careful legs. Captain. Captain. You are a delegation of exhibitors. This is not a human matter. It's somebody's matter, Gray said. Nobody here's claiming it. There is a process. A response must be authorized, staffed, and lawfully mandated by the Standing Security Committee, which cannot convene until... Then convene it. Gray didn't look at him. I'll be gone before you find the room. The functionary's voice climbed. You have no standing to pursue. You have no mandate. If you leave this station armed and pursue a sovereign delegation, the Council will not protect you. It will not recognize your authority. It may not recognize your right to return. That stopped Gray. He turned, and the functionary flinched from something flat and gray in his face. Recognize whatever you want, Gray said. Sanction us. Condemn us. Convene a committee and write it all down. He let it sit. Somebody has your High Counselor in the dark right now, and every soul in this room is going to talk about jurisdiction until he stops breathing. That's what all of you are going to do. Talk. He started walking again. The functionary did not follow him a second time. Behind Gray, low, Rook said. That was almost a speech. Don't get used to it. Room's watching us go, Falatau said. Quiet. He didn't turn his head, but he saw everything, always. They laughed at the ships this morning. They're not laughing now. They will be again, Gray said, if we're wrong. They hit the freight doors at a jog. The ugly ships did not look like much from the concourse, but they looked like a great deal from the inside. Juanita was aboard the lead ship before the rest of them cleared the airlock, and she was not the woman who had screamed about a crate. She moved down the port gun deck fast for her size, coverall sleeves shoved up over thick forearms, and where she passed, the ship changed. She hauled a lever and a panel that had looked like scorched junk plating folded back off a barrel as wide across as a man's chest. She keyed a housing, and the thing inside woke with a sound Gray felt in his teeth, a low mechanical growl climbing into something worse. All down the deck, the ugly, mismatched, welded-in anger machines were shrugging off their disguises, and underneath the disguises, they were not built for any fare. Teo, she barked. Port battery, talk to me. Green. She's green. Teo was strapped in at the fire station, hands flying, and the fast, nervous stream from the concourse was gone entirely. When the boy actually worked, he went quiet and precise, and somewhere far away. Coolant's still cold. I need a burn to seat the feed or she'll jam on the third cycle. Then burn it. That'll light us up on their sensors. They'll see the... Good. Let them see. She slapped the housing flat with her palm. Let them sit over there and wonder what it is. Wondering's the first thing that kills the calm ones. Gray came up the deck. Status. My babies are waking up." She didn't turn around. She was running a hand along a feed line, checking it the way you'd check a child for fever. "You want to actually know what these do, Thomas? Or are you going to keep pretending you read the specs I sent you?" "I read the effect. That's all I need from a weapon." "Effect?" She snorted, and there was no humor in it, just a kind of grim satisfaction. She patted the great ugly barrel like it was a dog. "Here's the whole gospel. You get in close. That's it. That's the sermon. Everybody out here builds for range. 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 Throw the pretty light across the pretty dark and never smell what you killed. So they armor for range. Distance hits. Glancing hits. They shrug those off like rain on a roof." She keyed the housing shut and turned to face him. "So we don't fight at range. We get in past where their armor's even thinking about, close enough that the fancy stuff can't track, and the thick stuff wasn't made for it. And we put the ugly right up against them. Nobody armors for ugly. Nobody out here expects you to come close enough to bite. They've forgotten it's even a thing you can do." Down the deck, hauling his own weapon into its cradle, Rook called back. "She's giving the get-in-close sermon. It's a good sermon. It's a long sermon. Carry your gun better, and I'll shorten it." Gray watched her hands move over the feed line, thinking something he had thought 100 times and never once said out loud. Everything Juanita Tavares built, big or small, was built to win up close. A pistol or a ship's gun, it made no difference. She designed them all to be useless at a polite distance and murderous once you were near enough to smell what you were killing. She built for the moment the range was gone, and the thing was already on top of you. He had never asked her why she built them that way. He knew why. He had carried her out of the room where she learned it, a long time ago, past men he'd known, into a graying morning. "Get them all hot," Gray said. "Everyone." Juanita finally looked up at him, cigarette back in the corner of her mouth, unlit, the way it always was. "You're really going to chase reptiles into the black in my ugly little ships?" "Yes." "Good." She jammed a panel closed with the heel of her hand. "Because they walked into a room full of people, and they took somebody, and they did it like nobody could touch them, like it was owed to them." She turned back to her babies. "Somebody needs to teach them that was rude. Might as well be the cook." The kiss towel had not run blind. Gray stood over the plot table on the cramped bridge and read the little they had. The station's own tracking was garbage. Half the sensor grid was still dead from whatever the Kestal had spent to take the counselor, but the ugly ships carried their own eyes, and Teo had bled the fair's dying network for a last handful of seconds of data before it went fully dark. "They had a ship on a service berth the whole time," Teo said, feeding it up onto the plot. "Not in the registry. Came in as a cargo hauler a couple cycles back and never logged out. Just sat there. They walked him straight down a maintenance spine right to it and burned before anyone thought to seal a door. Heading? Out. Away from the shipping lanes. Away from the relays. Away from everything." His hands moved across the board. "There's nothing out that way, Captain. No colonies. No stations. No reason." "There's a reason," Falatau said from the hatch. He had his case with him. He was always near his case now. "Or they wouldn't go." Gray looked at the line the Kestal ship had drawn into the dark. Falatau was right. You didn't haul a counselor into empty space to kill him. You could do that anywhere. You could do that in the maintenance spine. You took him somewhere. A rendezvous, a holdfast. Something the Dominion could stand up in front of the Council and swear did not exist. "They've got a head start and a plan," Gray said. "We've got neither." "We've got these ships," Rook said over the gun deck feed. "That's the plan." They burned after the Kestal ship into the empty dark, and for a long stretch, it was only the chase, the enemy running hard and clean toward whatever waited, the ugly human ships closing by slow degrees. The reptile ship was faster to turn, cleaner in the vacuum, everything the human ships were not. But the human ships had never been built to turn, or to be clean, or to be anything but one thing: pointed at a target and told to go. Every scrap of elegance the reptiles had, the humans had spent on raw thrust. Ugly engines too big for the hulls, burning past any sane red line, hauling those bricks forward harder the longer they ran. In the open dark, with one straight line to run down, they were the worst thing in the galaxy to have behind you. They came on like something that did not know how to quit, and the gap closed and closed and closed. On the Kestal ship, they noticed. Gray didn't see it, but he read it in the way the enemy vessel behaved: a course correction, a probing sensor sweep sent back down its own wake to see what was following it into the dark. He built the moment in his head. The report reaching their bridge. A pursuer. Ships. Human. And then the contempt. Because that was the Kestal, and it was the whole beautiful room back on the station wearing scales instead of robes. They were patient. They were coordinated. They were extraordinarily good at everything with a pattern in it. They had planned this for a cycle. Every piece set in its place, every door timed. The ship waiting. The maintenance spine walked clean. A junk vessel crewed by the species everyone laughed at did not fit anywhere in that plan. So the plan did what plans do with the thing that doesn't fit. It dismissed it. The Kestal ship did not change course. It held its arrogant line straight to the rendezvous and let the ugly little thing come. Because what, in the end, was the ugly little thing going to do? "They're not even running from us," Teo said, watching the plot, and he sounded almost insulted. "They saw us. They looked right at us and they just kept going. Like we're not here. And we're right behind them." "They think we're nothing," Gray said. "It's the same mistake the room made this morning. The exact same one. Everybody out here makes it." He set both hands flat on the plot. "Close the range, Teo. Get us in past where their armor's thinking about. All the way in." "How far in?" "Until they can smell us." They caught the Kestal ship where the dark was thickest, and there were no stars close enough to matter. It let them catch it. Right to the last it held its arrogant line. And then, close enough finally that even contempt had to answer, it turned to swat the annoyance off its back. It was bigger than the human lead ship, heavier through the hull. Its gun swung out gleaming and precise, built for range, built to reach across the black and burn a target down long before that target ever got close enough to be a problem. It fired first. It was a range weapon in the hands of a range species, and it did the only thing it knew. The bolt caught the human ship a glancing blow across the scorched forward plating. The ship shuddered. Held. Kept coming. "Hull's fine," Falatau reported. "Flat. It kissed us. They build for range." Juanita's voice came over the deck comm, and there was something almost tender in it now. The voice of a woman watching a lesson she had spent a lifetime waiting to teach. "Poor stupid things. Watch what happens, Thomas. Watch what happens when you don't give them any." Gray put the ugly ship's blunt nose straight down the Kestal's throat. "Rook." Been waiting on the word. "Teo. Port battery." Green. No stream now, no nerves, just the quiet, faraway precision. Cold and green and hungry. The Kestal ship fired again and missed clean, the bolt tearing through empty black, because the human ship was no longer where a range weapon expects a target to sit and burn. It was inside, driving in. Closing to a distance, the reptiles had never once, in all their patient, coordinated, pattern-loving history, had to fight at. Gray watched the enemy hull swell across the forward port until it filled the whole of it. close enough to see the seams in its armor. Close enough that all that beautiful range meant nothing at all. Close enough to bite. Words given, Gray said. Say hello. The port battery said hello. It did not sound like the Kestal guns. Their guns were a clean, high whine, a range weapon's polite cough across the dark. Juanita's battery made a sound like a foundry falling down a flight of stairs, and at knife range, it did not miss. The first burst walked across the Kestal ship's flank, and the flank came apart. Not the clean puncture of a range hit, a tearing. The ugly rounds went in where the armor had never been built to be hit, and they opened the hull like a can. Hull breach, their aft quarter, Teo called. She's venting. Good hit, Rook said from the gun. He sounded bored. He always sounded bored. It was the worst sign there was. Want me to finish her? No. Gray had his eyes on the enemy hull filling the forward port. He's in there. Cripple, don't kill. Engines and guns only. Nothing amidships. Nothing you can't see the far side of. Copy. No fun. A pause. Engines. The heavy gun spoke again, and it was a different thing now. Not the tearing burst, but a single deliberate hammer blow. Placed. The Kestal ship's drive flared, guttered, died. The vessel lurched and began to tumble, slow, wounded, its clean line suddenly useless. Drive's dead, Teo said. She's drifting. Guns. Rook took the Kestal weapon mounts off one at a time. Almost gentle for Rook. Each shot was a decision. The range weapons that had missed them in the dark went silent, blown off their mounts, and the beautiful, arrogant ship that had held its line all the way into the black was now a crippled thing, turning end over end, with a hole in its aft quarter and a high counselor somewhere in its belly. Gray let out a breath. Step 1. Falatau. Here. The master sergeant was already at the bridge hatch, already still. That deep stillness that meant the killing part of him had come up to the surface and was waiting. His case was open somewhere below. His Marines were moving to the boarding lock. Not yet, Gray said. She's crippled, but she's not ours. Hold. Holding. Teo. Where's the rest of them? Because there was a rest of them. Gray had known it since the maintenance spine, since Falatau said there's a reason, or they wouldn't go. You did not haul a counselor into empty dark unless something was waiting in it. Teo's answer came half a second before the plot lit up. Contact. Contacts. Burning in hard. Ahead and high. His voice stayed level, but it climbed a notch. More than one. A lot more than one, Captain. They came out of the dark where the holdfast waited, and they came in the pattern the Kestal loved. Tight, coordinated, a wall of clean holes moving as one thing. Zari's reinforcements, the protection force. They had felt the prize go silent, and they were burning in to take it back and to swat, finally, permanently, the ugly little thing that had dared to chase. That's a formation, Rook said. That's a real formation. That's Zari's answer, Gray said. He won't make the same mistake twice. He's not going to fight us close. He's going to make us fight him the way he's good at. The Kestal came on in a wall, and it was. Gray had to give them this. A beautiful piece of work. They didn't scatter. They didn't charge. They spread into a coordinated envelope, ships slotting into position with the machine precision of a species that had drilled this 10,000 times, each hole covering the next, their range weapons overlapping into a killing box with the human element at the center. It was doctrine. It was patient. It was exactly the fight the Kestal wanted, at exactly the range where their guns worked and Juanita's did not. And the human element was small. There were the escorts, 2 of them, ugly sisters to the lead ship, blunt and scorched and slow to turn. They had come into the dark on the flanks, holding wide, covering the lead ship's approach. Now they were inside a closing box of Kestal range weapons, and the box began to burn. "Ristov's hit!" came a voice off the escort channel, tight. "Starboard escort! We're hit! We're—" A crash of static. Gray's eyes went to the plot. The starboard escort had taken a full overlapping volley across its bow. It was still there, still under power. But it was bleeding atmosphere, and its forward battery had gone dark. "Ristov, status." "Forward gun's gone. Half my crew's on the deck." A ragged breath. "She'll still burn. Point me at something." The box tightened. The Kestal wall began methodically closing the range down to where they wanted it. Not too far, not too close. The exact distance their doctrine was built around. In another minute, they would have the humans boxed and gutted at leisure. It was working. It was working the way it always worked, on everyone, for 1,000 years. Gray looked at the geometry of it. He looked at the overlapping fire, the careful spacing, the way each Kestal hull sat precisely far enough from the next to give its range weapons a clean lane. He looked at the crippled prize drifting at the center of it all, the ship with Eleni inside, the ship the whole wall had come to protect. He looked at the distance the Kestal had chosen, and he understood, the way Juanita had been trying to make the whole galaxy understand for a lifetime, that every assumption in that beautiful formation was built around one thing: range. "Teo," Gray said, "plot me a line straight through the middle of them, through the tightest part, right past the prize." Teo turned in his straps. "Through them, into the formation?" "Into the formation, all the way in. Captain, if we go in there, we're inside their fire." "So are they," Gray said. He drove the ugly ship into the heart of the Kestal wall, and the wall's greatest strength became the thing that killed it. Because a formation built for range is a formation built on the assumption that the enemy stays outside it. Every gun lane, every overlapping field of fire, every careful interval was drawn for a target out there, at distance, in the box. The Kestal had never in their patient history planned for the target to come inside the box and sit down among them. Gray put the lead ship into the middle of their formation, and everything the Kestal had built turned into a trap for the Kestal. They could not fire freely. Every clean lane now had a friendly hull on the far side of it, or the crippled prize, the one ship in the dark they could not afford to hit. A Kestal gunner who fired at the human ship in their midst was firing across his own formation, at his own ships, past the counselor they had come to save. Their coordination, their beautiful overlapping fields, became a cage they had locked themselves inside. The humans had no such problem. "Rook," Gray said, "everything that isn't the prize." Finally, the heavy gun came off the leash. It was not precise now. It did not need to be. Rook put the foundry falling downstairs into the Kestal hulls at a range they had never armored for, and the ugly rounds did to them what they had done to the first ship, but with no restraint holding the volume down. Armor built to shrug off distance came apart against something pressed right up against it. A Kestal hull to port simply opened, bow to stern, and stopped being a ship. "Teo," Gray said. "The other thing." Teo's hands moved. "Arming. She's Mama Bear's nastiest, Captain. Once she's loose, she doesn't— Loose her." Whatever Juanita had built into the belly of the ugly ship, it did not announce itself. There was no great beam, no dramatic light. There was just a soft cough from somewhere under the deck, and then a Kestal ship that had been maneuvering to bring its guns to bear stopped maneuvering, and then stopped being intact, from the inside out, its clean hull bulging and splitting along seams that should have held. Innocent looking. Devastating. Built by a woman who understood, better than any engineer in the galaxy, what it was to be trapped in a small space with a thing that wanted you dead. Over the deck-com, calm, almost pleased, Juanita said, "There she goes. Mind the recoil, it fouls the trim." "Noted," Gray said. "I mean it, Thomas. You're going to warp the—" "Noted, Juanita." The Kestal wall came apart. Not all at once. They were not stupid, and they were not cowards. But the stillness that was their whole nature, the coiled, patient control, cracked, and Gray watched it crack on the plot. Watched the beautiful coordinated formation dissolve into individual ships, each suddenly, separately, trying to solve a problem their doctrine had no answer for. A thing had gotten inside. Inside the box, inside the pattern, inside the range. And they didn't know how to fight a thing that would not stay where it was supposed to die. On the starboard flank, the wounded escort was dying. Gray could see it on the plot. Ristov's ship venting hard, drive guttering, the hull going dark section by section. It wasn't going to make it home. Ristov knew it before Gray did. "Ristov, break off," Gray said. "Get to a pod, get your people off, I'll come back for—" "No time, Captain." The voice was ragged, and it was steady, and it was not the voice of a man who wanted this. "She's holed through. We're not getting off her." A breath. "But she'll still burn, and there's one of them about to get past you." Gray saw it. A Kestal hole tearing out of the collapsing formation, running for open range, where it could turn and fight again, where it could reach the prize, reach them, kill more. "Ristov," Gray started. "It's already done, Thomas." Quiet now. The only time the man had ever used his name. "Let me make it count." Gray closed his eyes, opened them. "Go," he said. It was the hardest order he had given all day. Ristov's dying ship put itself across the Kestal's path and would not move. The reptile tried to turn. Ristov did not. His ship was never built to turn. It was built to go. And it went. Straight into the enemy's flank. Guns firing until the guns and the crew and the ship were gone. And the Kestal hull was gone with them. The escort channel went silent. Gray did not look away from the plot. He put it where it had to go for now, in the place you went back to later, if there was a later. "Ristov's down," Teo said quietly. "He took one with him," Falatau said from the hatch. It was the only eulogy there was time for. It was the only kind Ristov would have wanted. When it was over, the dark was full of dead Kestal ships, and one that still lived. The reinforcements were broken. Some destroyed, the rest scattered into the black, burning away from a fight that had stopped making sense to them, carrying home a report the Dominion would not want to believe. The killing box was a graveyard. And at the center of it, turning slow and silent, drive dead and guns gone, drifting alone now with nothing left to protect it, was the prize. The kidnapping ship, crippled exactly as much as Gray had needed, and no more, with Counselor Eleni inside it. Gray stood on the cramped bridge of a ship that stank of scorched wiring and coolant, with a dead escort behind him and a wounded one holding station, and he looked at the silent Kestal vessel drifting in the ruin of its own rescue. Somewhere in there was Zari. Gray was sure of that too, the way he was sure of everything about the reptile now. Zari had never left the prize. He had ridden it out of the maintenance spine with the counselor, and he had run the whole defense from inside it, called the reinforcements in, set the killing box, watched it fail, all from the one deck in the dark he was certain no human would dare to burn. He was right about that. Gray wouldn't burn it. He'd send something worse. Gray turned from the port. Falatau was at the hatch, huge and still, and behind him the Marines were already at the boarding lock, and the killing part of him had been up at the surface and waiting for a long time now. "She's ours," Gray said. "Isolated. Crippled. Nowhere left for them to run. Yes, Falatau said. Gray looked at him, looked at the Marines behind him, looked at the case, closed now, in Falatau's hand, full of the clothes, personal, ugly things Juanita built. For the moment, there was no distance left between you and the enemy. Now go get him, Gray said. The boarding lock mated with a shriek of tortured metal, and Falatau went first, because Falatau went first through everything. The Kestal ship was dark inside, and it was cold. That was the first thing. The drive was dead, and a dead drive meant no heat, and the interior had already begun to give its warmth up to the void, breath fogging in the beams of the Marines' lights. The corridors were wrong, too tall, too narrow, built for a body that did not move the way a human moved, and they stank of reptile and coolant, and the copper reek of the venting they'd done to it from outside. Falatau opened his case in the airlock and did not take out a rifle. He took out one of Juanita's babies. It was ugly and short, and looked like a piece of industrial plumbing, and it was built for exactly this. A corridor, a sealed room, the range gone, the enemy already in the space with you. There was no elegance in it. There was no elegance anywhere near Falatau. He checked it once, closed the case, and moved into the cold ship without a word. And his Marines moved with him, and the killing part of him that had waited so long was finally, quietly, home. The first Kestal came out of a cross corridor fast. Not fast enough. In the open dark of space, they were coordinated, patient, deadly at range. Here, in the tight, cold guts of their own dying ship, at a distance measured in arm lengths, they met a weapon that had been designed by someone who understood this exact moment in her bones. Falatau's baby coughed once. The Kestal came apart against the bulkhead. He was already stepping over it, already moving to the next corner, before the sound finished. "Cold's working on them," came Gray's voice in his ear, from the lead ship. "Ship's temperature's dropping. They're cold-blooded. They'll slow." "They're slowing," Falatau agreed. He put a shoulder to a hatch, felt it give. "Not enough yet. Push while it's in your favor." Pushing. The ship did not give itself up. Zari's Kestal knew what the humans knew. That range meant nothing in here, that the tight corridors were the one place a reptile and a human met on something like even terms. So they fought for it, compartment by compartment, hatch by hatch, in the freezing dark, and they made the Marines pay. They lost Olsen at the third bulkhead. He went through a hatch the way you were trained to, and a Kestal was waiting on the far side of it, low in the cold, patient even now, and it took him before the man behind him could fire. Falatau killed the thing that killed Olsen. He did it without a sound, and without slowing, because slowing was how you lost the next one too. And there was a counselor somewhere ahead in the cold, and grief was a thing you did later, if there was a later. Falatau had learned that from Gray. Gray had learned it in a war he never talked about. They dragged Olsen into a cleared compartment and kept moving. The cold deepened. The Kestal grew slower. Gray was right. The ship's death was killing them by degrees, their movements losing the terrible smoothness, their aim dragging. But slow was not gone, and a slow Kestal in a corridor was still a wall of teeth and scaled muscle, and the Marines bled for every meter of the tall, narrow dark. Then Teo's voice came over the channel, tight with urgency. "Captain, Mama Bear's gone across." A pause on the line. Gray's voice, very flat. "Say again." The charge for the aft hatch jammed. She couldn't clear it remotely, so she crossed on the second lock to fix it by hand. Falatau cut 2 men off the stack to walk her in. "She's in the aft section with cover." "Keep it that way," Gray said. "Copy." Then Teo's voice changed. "Contact. Aft. Her escort's engaged. They're a compartment off her." "Captain, For about a minute she's alone back there. Juanita Tavares was elbow-deep in a fouled feed housing when the Kestal found her. She had crossed because it needed crossing. The charge should have blown the aft hatch and opened a second route for Falatau's Marines. But it had jammed. Juanita had built it, and there was no one else on either ship who could clear it fast enough. Falatau had not let her go alone. 2 of his Marines had walked her in and taken the corner while she worked. But the ship was full of Sari's people, and when a Kestal came at them from a cross-corridor, both Marines moved to stop it before it could reach her. So for less than a minute, she was alone in the cold and the dark, on her knees in front of the housing with a tool in her teeth, working the way she had worked on her babies her whole life, steady, competent, swearing softly. The Kestal came around the corner and saw her and stopped. It saw what everyone saw. A short, heavy, aging human female, unarmored, on her knees, a tool in her mouth, soft and slow and utterly out of place in a warship's cold belly. Prey. The easiest thing it had seen all day. It did not even raise its weapon. It came for her the way you come for something that cannot hurt you, taking its time, contemptuous, certain. That was its mistake, because the woman on her knees wasn't the cook anymore. She had been the cook once, cornered once, with nothing, and something in her had chosen to fight instead of die, and a man had carried her out of that room. And, in the years after, given the thing inside her somewhere to go, she had studied, she had trained, she had spent the years since building weapons for this exact moment, the range gone, the doors open, the thing already in the room with you, and she had never once stopped being the woman who reached for what was in her hands and used it. What was in her hands now was not a spoon. She came up off her knees, faster than a thing that size should move, and the tool came out of her teeth and into her fist, and she put one of her own babies, the smallest one, the one she kept on her because old habits from an old kitchen never left, into the Kestal's throat where the scaled plates gapped, and she did it with the cold, professional economy of years of practice. The reptile that had come for the helpless old woman went down against the bulkhead, and Juanita Tavares stood over it, breathing hard, furious, exactly as furious as she had been the first time, a decade and a galaxy away. "You interrupted me," she told it, like that was the rudest thing anyone had ever done. Then she spat the taste of it out, knelt back down at the housing, and cleared the jam, because the Marines needed the hatch, and the job was not finished. Her 2 escorts came back through the far hatch a breath later, the cross-corridor threat down behind them, and found the old woman working and a dead Kestal cooling against the bulkhead. They had the sense not to say a word about it. "Mama Bear, status," Gray's voice, hard. "Charge is clear, hatch is good, and there's a dead reptile leaking all over the deck, if anybody's counting." A grunt as she seated the housing. "Tell Falatau to mind the aft route, it's open now. And tell him to hurry up. I'm not the babysitter for this ugly lizard barge." On the lead ship, Gray closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them. "Falatau, aft route's open. Go." They found Eleni in the deepest, coldest compartment of the ship, and Sari was waiting with him. The High Counselor was alive, bound, fragile, his watercolored robe filthy now, his fine features drawn with cold and fear, but alive, upright and watching the hatch with the terrible composed stillness of his kind even here, even now. And over him stood the Kestal in the harness of rank, the one who had lifted an old man by the throat in a room full of 1,000 cowards, the one who had held his arrogant line all the way into the dark. Sari had fallen back to the one place he was sure the humans would not burn. He had been right. Gray had not burned it. Gray had sent Falatau instead. The reptile was slower now. The cold had reached even him, dragged at the smooth, coiled control that was his whole nature. But he was not beaten, and he was not afraid, and when the Marines came through the hatch, he moved to put himself between them and the prize, with the last of that patient, dreadful competence. He had a blade to Counselor Eleni's throat before Falatau cleared the hatch. Everyone stopped. "Back," Zari said. The first human audible word any of them had heard from a Kestal, forced through a mouth not built for it, cold and guttural and slow. "Back, or the Council loses its voice!" Falatau did not back. Falatau stood in the cold with the ugly close-range weapon held low and ready. He looked at the reptile, the blade at Eleni's throat, and the distance between them, then did the arithmetic Gray had taught him. At this range, Zari had nowhere to retreat and almost no time to react. Falatau only needed one clean shot. "You're cold," Falatau told him. "Quiet, almost kind. You're slow, and your knife hand's shaking." Zari's knife hand was shaking. The cold had it. He had held his control all the way to the bottom of the dark, and here at the end, in the freezing belly of his own dead ship, the stillness finally cracked. Falatau was faster than the shake. It was close, and it was ugly, and it was over in the space of one breath. The kind of work Juanita's babies were made for. The kind of work no elegant thing in the galaxy had thought the crude humans capable of. When it was done, Zari was on the deck, and the blade was on the deck, and High Counselor Eleni was alive, and Falatau was already cutting him loose, with hands surprisingly gentle for their size. Eleni looked at the huge, quiet human, at the ugly and strange weapon, and at the dead Kestal commander who had been so certain. And something moved behind the fine, composed features that had never in a long, elegant life had cause to move before. "Counselor," Falatau said, "Captain Gray's compliments. We're taking you home." Eleni's voice, when it came, was low and melodic and stunned. "No one came," he said. "The Council, the others. No one came." "We came," Falatau said. He got the old man up and put him behind the wall of Marines, and they carried him out of the cold, dark ship toward the light, past Olsen, past the dead reptiles, past a fat old woman sealing her tools back into their roll, who looked up as the counselor passed and gave him a short nod, one professional to another, before going back to her work. Behind them, the crippled ship drifted silent in the graveyard of the fleet that had come to save it. Ahead, Gray was waiting. And somewhere back at the fair, 1,000 delegates who had laughed at the ugly ships were about to learn what the ugly ships had brought home. The ugly ships came back ugly. They limped into the Ashwall's pristine berths, trailing atmosphere and scorched plating, one of them not coming home at all. The station that had laughed at them on the way out did not laugh now. Word had run ahead of them the way word does, and everyone on the concourse already knew what the battered human ships were carrying in their belly, because everyone on the concourse had spent the whole time. The humans were gone doing nothing at all. Gray walked Eleni down the ramp himself. The old Salith could stand. He would not be carried. He came down on his own long, unsteady legs, filthy robe and all, and 100 worlds watched their High Counselor walk back into the light on the arm of a crude human in a scorched uniform, and not one of them had a word ready for it. On the rails where the elegant species had traded jokes about mining tools, there was no sound at all now. Behind them came the cost. Falatau, carrying Olsen. He laid the dead Marine out on the clean deck where everyone could see, because the galaxy was going to look at what this had cost, whether it wanted to or not. Then the wounded. Then a space on the ramp, where Ristov and his crew should have been, and were not, and never would be again. Gray did not make a speech. He handed the counselor into the trembling hands of the Salith delegation, stepped back, and let the silence do the work no speech could. The whole beautiful station stood in that silence and looked at a dead human boy on a clean deck and began, slowly, unwillingly, to understand. Down in the wounded lead ship, Juanita Tavares was on her knees, swearing at the trim. "Look at what he did to you," she told the warped feed line, running a hand down the scorched barrel the way you touch a child come home hurt. I told him about the recoil. He said, "Noted. Look at you now. My baby." Teo was beside her, arm in a sling, pale but alive, holding a work light one-handed because she'd told him to. "Get that arm looked at," she said, not looking up. "I'm holding the light. You're holding the light with a broken arm." She pushed a ration bar into his good hand without looking. "Eat. Then the arm. Then come back and hold the light." He ate. He always ate in the end. It was easier than arguing, and she'd keep pushing food at him until the sun went out, because feeding people was what she did with her hands when they weren't building or fixing or killing. Falatau ducked through the low hatch and stood a moment, watching the old woman fuss over the wrecked battery and the wounded boy both, with the same hands, in the same breath. He had a cut over one eye somebody had closed badly. He didn't mention it. "They're calling you Mama Bear out there," he said. "The Salith. They think it's a rank." "It's not a rank." "I know what it is," Falatau said. He did. The ones who'd been with her long enough knew. The way you know a thing without being told. That there had been a husband once, and a son, and a war called Pegasus that took them both and gave nothing back. That a woman who has had everyone taken from her will sometimes decide, quietly and for good, not to let it happen to anyone else in her reach. That she'll feed them and curse them and build them terrible things to keep them breathing, because it is the only thing left to do with all that love and nowhere to put it. Nobody said any of that. You didn't with her. Falatau just said, "Get your own arm looked at. That reptile clipped you." It did not. It did. He nodded at the tear in her sleeve, the dark, drying stiff. "You didn't notice because you were mad about the trim." Juanita looked down at her arm like it belonged to someone else. "Huh," she said. "So it did." And she went back to the battery because the battery was hurt worse than she was, and the battery was hers. The council convened in the end, the way the council always convened, but it convened around a different center than before. Eleni stood before them, bathed and robed and steadier, but changed in a way no robe could cover. The Kestal seat was empty. The Dominion had already begun the long, elegant lie of denial, calling it the work of a rogue. The council would take a long time deciding whether to believe it. That was its nature. But there was one thing it could not deliberate away, and Eleni said it plainly. "I was taken from the center of this body, in front of all of you, and all of you did what we have always done. You convened. You debated jurisdiction. You waited to be certain." His fine head turned slowly over the room that had frozen while he was carried into the dark. One delegation did not. The one we laughed at. They asked no permission and waited for no quorum, and they lost people in the cold for a stranger, not even of their kind. His voice did not rise. It never did. It was not elegance that came from me. It was them. I would ask this council to remember that the next time it meets a species it decides is beneath its notice. I intend to. Gray stood at the back, where he had put himself on purpose, and said nothing. But he felt the room turn. 1,000 years of easy contempt recalculating into something warier. the way a creature recalculates a thing it has badly misjudged and cannot afford to misjudge again. The Dominion would learn the lesson harder later. By taking Eleni, they had shown the galaxy what they were willing to do, but in doing so, they had also exposed something they had never expected. The humans would not stand aside and wait. The Kestal had lost ships, and sorry in the dark, but they had lost something more valuable with them, the certainty that they could act while the rest of the galaxy watched. Everyone in that room had seen what happened when that certainty met the humans, and from now on, both the Council and the Dominion would have to account for it. That was the recalculation. Later, when the rooms were done with him, Gray found Juanita where he'd known she would be. She sat on a crate on the wounded gun deck, arm bandaged now, unlit cigarette in the corner of her mouth, looking at her battered battery in the low light. She didn't turn. She'd always known his step, since a long time ago, since a morning neither of them ever put into words. "They fix your counselor?" "They fixed him." "Good." A pause. "We lost Ristov, and the boy, Olsen." "I know. I built the things that were supposed to bring them home." "They brought a lot of people home," Gray said. "They brought a counselor home. They brought you home off that ship, when a reptile came around a corner thinking he'd found something easy." He sat down on the crate beside her, which he had not done in years, the way two people sit who have known each other since a night neither of them talks about. "You went across onto an uncleared hull. At your age. I had cover." "You lost your cover? Handled it yourself and finished the job." "Of course I finished the job." She rolled the cigarette to the other corner of her mouth. "Some reptile came around the corner and decided I'd be easy." A short breath that was almost a laugh, and not quite. "They always think the cook's going to be easy." Gray looked at her a long moment and did not answer right away, because there was too much to answer. He was thinking of a ruined kitchen years ago, of a spoon driven to the handle into a thing that had 4 eyes, and had thought, the way this reptile had thought, that it had found something soft. Of a wounded, furious woman standing in a room full of dead enemies, who should by every rule have killed her, and of the plain, impossible fact that she had chosen, with nothing in her hands, to fight instead of die. He was thinking of everything he'd helped that furious thing in her become, and all the people her terrible, clever weapons had carried back out of the dark and set down safe in the light. He was thinking the galaxy would spend 100 years telling the story of the ugly ships and the guns that were never supposed to work, and that not one soul in all that glittering civilized galaxy would ever know it started with a cook who would not freeze. He didn't say any of it. She'd have told him to shut up and hold the light. "No," Gray said. "They never learn." Juanita Tavares looked at her oldest friend and at her battered baby, and out through the scorched port at a galaxy that had finally stopped laughing. "Give it time," she said. "They will."
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.